Okay. Anybody remember where we left off last time? Isn't that what Pastor asked, right? Where we left off, man. Okay. Well, we're going to be starting on chapter 18 in the 13th book of Yisrayl, part 1, Gold, Purifying Gold. And this is chapter 18, and this is from the sermon 4/27/2013. So just almost 2 years ago. And the title is, We Must Prove Ourselves to Yahweh to Shine Like His Chosen as Pure Gold. And that's something that I always like to, I like to remind people, in counseling or, when problems arise and there's, maybe a little bit of discontentness or disgruntlement with situations that may occur. Always keep in mind that we're proving ourselves to Yahweh. And even the scripture speaks about in everything that we do, yes, to do it with all your might, but do it unto Yahweh. And I continually remember about the example that Pastor gave when he was telling us a little bit about the history of what he went through as he was coming up and his search for, he had a great search and a great thirst for knowledge and understanding from the Holy Scriptures, and everything that he did, his purpose was to draw him closer to Yahweh. And in building this kingdom that he knew that Yahweh was putting together in this last generation, and he wanted to be a part of that. And in all the different jobs that he had, a particular one that sticks out in my mind was the one that he talked about when he worked for one particular place where one of his jobs was cleaning the bathroom. And he got down on his hands and knees, and he got that toothbrush, and he was cleaning around the toilet and cleaning around the, getting all the tile and the grout and everything all clean. And I think we've all been in restrooms, we know how dirty and nasty those things can be. But his desire was to get that thing spick and span, and he knew that Yahweh would see that. Now Yahweh wasn't going to come down and use the restroom, even though we know that's where he was when he told the joke about the gassy gods. But his purpose was to prove himself to Yahweh that he would have the character of Yahweh in everything he put his hand to do, irregardless of whether the owner of the facility appreciated it or not. Of course they did, because everybody likes to go to the bathroom and to be a clean bathroom. They go there to make a mess, but they like it to be clean when they get there. But that was in his mindset. That is what was in his heart. And this is something that we have to take unto ourselves. This is a mindset that we need to have, an attitude that we need to have, because we're going to be tested. We're going to be tried. And this here proving ourselves it denotes kind of a rigorous period of trials and tests and pressure. It's like not too far from here. I think it's in between here and San Angelo. I guess it depends on which route you take. But there's the Goodyear Proving Grounds, and I guess they go there and they take their new series of tires and they put them on the cars and they drive around the tracks and spin out and peel out and do all these types of endurance tests and wet traction and snow and ice and sleet and rocks and everything. But they put the tires through this gamut of different tests to prove the worthiness of that tire to stand up to what they're saying it's going to stand up to, and to be labeled with that company's name on it. If it can't handle it, then they're not going to put it out on the market. And it's the same thing with us. We are going to be the children of Yahweh. We're going to bear the label of Yahweh's children. We're going to bear the label also of the seed of the witness, Yisrayl. From this house of Yisrayl, the seventh era, the seventh light, the magnificent work that was prophesied to be the greatest of all the works that came before it. The end of something, as Solomon says, is better than its beginning, but you needed the beginning to get to the end. So everything is essential, just like every member of the body having its part. And no one is less important, but everybody has different positions and so forth. So, keep this in mind when we go through our tests and when we go through our trials. Understand that Yahweh did bring you here to test you. Let's go back and let me see here. Deuteronomy Let's look at chapter 8. And let's look at verse 2. And it says, you must remember that Yahweh your Father led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness in order to humble you, test, and prove you, and know what was in your heart. So yes, is Yahweh testing you? Yes, he sure is. You know, he's placed us in the situation, he's placed us in an environment, and if we remember what we've learned from the peaceful solution, our environment is also what helps to develop our character. Our environment, our influences, our choices, our experiences, all these things help to develop our character, and Yahweh has placed us in these different environments so that our characters and our hearts may be proven, to see what we're going to do. What are we going to do when we're faced with a moral choice? Well, it's going to be up to us, because Yahweh's given us all the tools to make the right choice, but he wants to see what we're going to choose to do. Choose you this day who you will serve. We're free moral agents. Yahweh's not forcing us. You know, he's not forcing the Malachim. They're able to choose as well, and a lot of them have chosen to follow Satan. But he said he did this in order to test and prove you and know what was in the heart, to see whether you would keep his laws or whether you would not. All right? So keep that in mind. But he says here, and this is just in the title here, we must prove ourselves to Yahweh to shine like his children as pure gold. And of course, we know everything that we see coming forth from the house of Yahweh in regards to this gold, and the beauty of this gold, and the honor that is placed upon the characteristic of this pureness of gold that we are striving to attain. And of course, the purple that goes with it, that royalty. Gold was, and it still is, an extremely highly valuable commodity on the market. And the dollar is supposed to be compared to that. Of course, I think it's oil now, but they still call oil, what they call oil, black gold, right? But this is what we're striving to become. So let's look here. Pastor gets started here. He talks about, at first he's reading about the cards, the cards that were put out for the peaceful solution about solving your problems, and talking a little bit about the articles that were read at the very beginning. Let's look over to page 184, and we'll start right there. And let's look at verse 9 there. He says, now you saw the news, what man is doing, what man's governments are doing, and of course, this is the plan of Yahweh, to let them play their hand. To let mankind go his own way, to let him experience a little bit of sin, to let him have his cake and eat it too, to sow his oats, to experience life to its fullest, with all the STDs and the curses, and the debt and the depression and the drug addiction and the alcoholism, and the hatred and retaliation. That, to its fullest. Yahweh said, if that's what you want to do, then I will allow you to do this. But while you do your thing over here, I'm going to be plucking out 1, 2, from a country, 1 from a city, 2 from a country, and so forth. And I'm going to be placing them in my house and training them in the laws of Yahweh. While you're continuing in all your foolishness, I'm going to bring them out, and they're going to become the top, the choicest, the most select people in that generation, even while all this sin is taking place. In the peak of sin, right now, in these last days, Yahweh is using the simplicity of his laws to bring a group of people to perfection. It's not a hocus-pocus, diddly-docus. Yahweh's not waving a magic wand down here. None of us... I know I didn't come by no Immaculate Conception. Anybody in here come through Immaculate Conception? Right? No. We're all born of men, the sons of men. And we came with all our imperfections, all the garbage, all the baggage, all the skeletons that are in the closet and everything, all the sins of our forefathers. And Yahweh drew us out of that, and he says to the gods in heaven, he says to the Malachim, now watch this. Watch this. I bet none of you can do this. Only Yahweh, keep in mind, only Yahweh of all the gods has a plan to stop sin. No other gods has a plan to do that. They've got bandages. They've got hospitals. They've got creams that you can rub on yourself. But they don't have a plan to stop sin. Only Yahweh does. So Yahweh says he's going to let man play their hand. Since they refused his laws, he says, well, this is what you're going to bring yourself to. So I'm going to let you do it. Nothing will be withheld from you. Now, if you remember this was in the days of Nimrod. And let's go back to Genesis chapter 10. Let's just refresh our minds there. In the Bereshith, in the beginning. And of course, when we keep in mind in regards, or Genesis chapter 11, when we keep in mind about this Nimrod, not that it was a man, but it was a system, okay? And it was a system of confusion, a Babylonian system of confusion. That started with Nimrod, but Nimrod, he got some of his skills from Cain, who rejected the laws of Yahweh as well. And he brought confusion not only to his mind, but to the minds of those who followed him. And so let's look at verse 11 here. And let's, if we look back to verse 2, and it says in that second part there, let's read the whole verse. And it came to pass that as they journeyed from the east, the beginning, or where they started from, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. And look at verse 4, and they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower, whose top is in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. And of course, this was an expression of pride and rebellion. We're the biggest, we're the best. Let us make a name for ourselves. And you see this when you go to to big cities and you go to these college towns and so forth. They've made a name for themselves, all right. Right now it's a place, the colleges are a place where women basically have to fear being raped. This is a very common occurrence, and in fact, I think they just came out with a documentary, or are coming out with a documentary. I forget the name of it, but it's about, these sexual assaults that take place on the campuses and how the colleges are actually covering these things up. They don't want this getting out. They want people thinking that their college is not a safe place where men and women go and mingle and drink and get drunk and do all types of drugs and all other types of things in mixed company. No, we're a hearty educational place where you can bring your children to come and learn the values of life, and they can be contributing members of society. Yes, bring us your wallet, bring us your children. That's what they want. They want that money. They want that endowment from people who've gone to these colleges and have given donations back to their alma maters. But he says here in verse 6, and Yahweh said, indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language. And this is what they begin to do. All right? And you can look at it this way. Look at it. Let's take that statement and look at it now and say, with this increase of technology. Indeed, the people have received an increase of technology. And they all have one thought on their mind. And this is what they do. Do they take that increase of technology and actually find ways to bring morality and bring life to mankind, to stop sin? No. They find ways to kill, to maim, to murder, to spread diseases. This is what mankind has chosen to do with a little bit of knowledge that was given to them, that was held back for a long period of time, thousands of years. This increase of knowledge was held back until these last days. What we see there between this time and the days of this beginning works of this Nimrod system and nowadays, what we see that ties the two together is the character. They have the same character as Nimrod and his crew that system, the Babylonian system, and the people who were working in it at that same time, if they were to get together now, they would be like peas in the pod. 2 peas in the same pod, because the characters are the same. And so what we have to do, or what Yahweh is working to do, and He's doing it through us right now, is getting that wicked character out of our hearts by replacing it with the laws of Yahweh. If you want to change a negative trait, eliminate a negative character trait, well, you have to do the opposite of what that trait is. If you want to stop hating, well, you need to start loving. And if you don't know how to love, then go to someone who can teach you how to love. And then start practicing what you're taught. And you'll start to see the results in your life, and you'll start making friends out of enemies. And he says here, after this, nothing that they purpose to do will be withheld from them. And of course, we know the history of what took place after that. But so he allowed mankind from that point on to continue to go his own way and experience getting his fingers burned and playing their hand at this system here to see what the end result would bring. But Yahweh also prophesied, like we just read here, he says, I will show you what your end will be. I will show you what you're going to bring upon yourself. And this is, of course, the prophecies and words from the inspired prophets. And when you think about these words of the inspired prophets, think about it according to the law of Yahweh. You know, what are the prophecies showing you? It's like we teach in the Peaceful Solution. You know, you're either going to bring about a reward or a consequence. It's just as simple as that. And the prophecies are showing you, well, you, after so long a time, are going to bring this consequence upon you and your children and your children's children years later because of the choice you made in breaking this law. Or you're going to bring this blessing upon you. And if you teach this to your children and they do it, then they'll bring the blessing, and they'll receive the blessing, and so forth. That's what prophecy does. It shows what occurs when the laws of Yahweh are broken and when the laws of Yahweh are kept. So we see here, that was Genesis chapter 11 there. And so Pastor asked if we had a missile that we can use to set that up there. I was all out of mine. Let's look over to page 185. And so let's look at verse 14, because he talks about the great Khan Yedidia. He says, this goes along with today's news of hunting an excuse to, of course, go into Syria. Korea drives U.S., and this is the article, to speed up Asia's plans. Now, this shows that there are plans that were made long ago, and in fact, Malachi Martin spoke of these plans. This is not an overnight thing. Russia put a ship here, so we're going to put a ship there. Put a few ships carrying nuclear bombs, and so forth. No, these are long-range plans. So in other words, these are not just things that the nations are instantaneously doing. They already have plans that have already been drawn out years ago, and some of these things have been revealed. You know, they've been working on these things for 20, 50-plus years to bring about a certain plan to take over a country and bring it under a particular system, okay? And then right now the Pope is striving very hard now to resurrect the Holy Roman Empire. But we know, according to prophecy, that kingdom will not rise again. So now, no, these are long-range plans. Now, what's taking place, it's the same crew that started in Nimrod's day, all right? It's the same crew. Now, we know that the crew that started in Nimrod's day isn't alive right now, or wasn't alive at the time of this sermon in 2013. But remember, it's the character. It's the character that unifies those people. Remember, they had one language. They had one mind. You know, they had one purpose in their mind. They were in unity, all right. It's like the couple that when the law was brought out, and then they were presented. To the counselors, or the priest went to them, and they were asking, to investigate, why they were, speaking these things about. In fact, the law was talking about unity. It was talking about expressing unity with the laws of Yahweh, with the house of Yahweh, and the priest, and so forth. And the couple said, "Well, no, we're in unity. We're in unity that we disagree with the house of Yahweh." the men and the woman, they were in unity, and they, unified themselves right out of the house of Yahweh and left. And so we can see there, unity, it can be a great or a bad thing depending on what you're unified for. But it's the same crew that started in Nimrod's day, but the knowledge was held back from them until these last days, of course, and then it's given to them. But it's the same ones that are bringing it down and making plans to fulfill their lust, their dreams, as they say. And remember, all the way over back here in Revelations, chapter 9, Revelations chapter 9, and if you look at verse 20, it speaks about this. It's still talking about these same men, or this same crew, who has this same Nimrod, confusion, Babylonish character. It says in verse 20, and the rest of the men who were not killed by these plagues, notice they still did not repent of the works of their hands. It wasn't the works of Yahweh, it was the works of their own hands, that they should not worship demons and gods of gold and silver and brass and stone of wood. And in verse 21, neither did they repent of their murderers, their sorceries, their fornications, nor their thefts. Okay? And of course, Jacob talks about these lusts here in Jacob chapter 4, about what causes the wars and the fightings. In Jacob chapter 4, verse 1, he says, what causes wars and fightings among you? Is it not from this? He's trying to get them to think about their own activities. He's not saying that this is some new thing. This has been going on for thousands of years. And you know these things because you've been taught them from the house of Yahweh. Is it not from this? Like Yeshua said, have you not read in the Holy Scriptures? Or he got on them, have you not read even in your own words that it says such, thus and such? He says it's from your lust that battle in your members. You lust, but you do not have. And of course, the purposes upon which they want to have their lust fulfilled is usually a selfish one and to take advantage of their neighbor. And he says, let's see here. Okay. Well, I lost my place there, but it's the same ones that are bringing this down and making plans to, fulfill their lust, as they say it. Now look at verse 15. And what amazes me is the non-caring attitude about the lives that are being taken here, about the murders that are being performed. But that's always amazed me too. When a person could kill a child and think nothing of it. And we see how hypocritical our system, not our system, the system. Our system is a system based on perfect laws. Their system is a system based on confusion. And one of the things in this system is that it's okay, if the thing, they don't call it a baby, because if they classify it as a baby, then it has life. I don't know what it had before, but it's got life if you call it a baby. I don't know. It's too confusing. But as long as it's in the womb and it's under so many months or so many weeks, it's okay to go ahead and terminate it. All right? Terminate that pregnancy. Now, somebody puts their baby in a trash can or, dumps it by the side of the road or something like that, or gets busted for child abuse, they're a criminal. Two men are fighting, and one strikes another and kills him. He's a murderer. But the person who took the life of a child, just doing their job. You see the confusion? It doesn't make any sense. But this is man's system. And you think about this, if we go to the world, if we leave Yahweh's house, and we go chasing after foolishness in the world, we're telling Yahweh that we want to be a part of this damnation that mankind is bringing upon himself. You like swimming? Well, you'll be able to swim in the lake of fire, because that's where you're going to end up being if you go and join the world. Because there is no mercy in the world, absolutely none whatsoever. And this is why David said when he was given a choice of what his consequence would be, he said, please, Yahweh, you pick my judgment, because I don't want to fall into the hands of mankind. Mankind is he has no mercy whatsoever. Just go back if you get an opportunity and look at some of the barbaric, torturous tools that mankind created to interrogate and torture their fellow human being. Some of the things are unimaginable what they will put somebody through. This comes from the minds of men. Let's look at page 186. Let's get verse 22. He says, "But if we fail to take over this government," and this was what one of the representatives was saying regarding the Islamic government here, or the Islamists. He says, she said that if we fail to take over this government, this Islamic government, is what this woman was saying. If we fail to take over this Islamic government, they're going to form bands and become stronger. And the Roman Empire was educated to do that thing. That's what Nimrod, the Nimrod system said. We'll build a tower, and he was a tyrant. This system was. It was run by tyranny, the same way it is today. And of course, we see this taking place with a lot of these groups. I know ISIS is one that's in the news. Of course, everything that we see, it seems to be turning people stronger and stronger against the Muslim people. And but like Pastor says, no one ever stops to ask why. Why have they resorted to this? Why have they resorted to this killing and this fighting and so forth? They just, they're turning the hearts and the minds of the people against this organization because they have a little bit of holiness. Now, I'm not talking about the people that are going and sawing people's heads off, that they have any, that's a holy thing or anything like that. But, remember, they also fall under this whole system of confusion, this Babylonian system. The only people who don't fall under that system are the ones who Yahweh has drawn out of it. The ones that Yahweh has drawn out of it through the teaching of the message of the laws of Yahweh. And right now, what you receive from the house of Yahweh, from this seventh era, is the golden oil, the pure golden oil, that if you will drink it unto yourself or take it unto yourself, then it goes within your body and it produces effect. Right? And that effect is symbolically light. When you keep the laws of Yahweh, when you hear the laws taught, and you accept the laws, yes, I hear you, Yahweh, that's what I'm going to do. All that you have said, we will do. And we all made that vow. And you start to practice that within your life, then the laws start to produce an effect within you. And it begins to be shown on the outside. And that's called righteousness. And that righteousness, Yeshua said, coming from you is the light to the world. But now, you can't produce that light on your own. And that's something that we have to remember. We can only have that production of that light as we receive it from the one or the tree that empties the golden oil into the golden bowls. From the one sent, Yisrael Hawkins. And as long as we hold fast to that, then Yahweh promises us that we will make it and we'll have a place in this kingdom. And let's look at verse 44. We kind of close out here because this is one point. I know we're just kind of skipping around but I just want to make this point here. In verse 44 on page 188, he says, of course, let's back up to 43. Yahweh is too, but he's got it on display. That is, he's anxious to see the ones who come out of this. And he calls heaven and earth to witness this thing. And he says, I'm seeing now that, yes, this is actually coming to pass, but in a different way than I thought. And he's got reminders there. In verse 44, now Yahweh, of course, is the teacher. He is. He's always been the teacher. And notice here, he sends out men. He inspires men to do these things, certain things, and he sets 7 works. That's represented, of course, by the 7 weeks that we're about to celebrate here. But he picks out men, as Pastor was saying here. Yeshua was one of them. Yisrayl was another, Jacob was another, and there were men who were picked out throughout this time period who he chose as his representatives and inspired them to go and teach this message to the world or to their group or wherever they were sent, to draw out the remnant, to complete the number of those who I will call into my house to be a part of this priesthood, to be a part of this great administration that Yahweh says he's putting together and making man in his image and likeness that's going to put an end to sin. that's your reward. You know, that's your honor that's placed upon your head. And if you'll hold fast to this, and don't take it lightly, brother. You know, this is a one in a quadrillion lifetime opportunity that's being handed to you right now to have the opportunity to be a part of not just any of the any of the 7 works, but to be a part of the 7th work out of 6,000 years. Think about that. And of all the people that have lived and died throughout that time period, we have this blessing of being here right now. You know, you had no you had no doing of that of your own. That only is from Yahweh. So take it seriously and, you know, continue to build one another up. And if you'll all please stand, turn it over to our next teacher, the great Kahan Nathaniel.
Praise Yahweh, men of Yahweh. You may all be seated. You know, when the great Kahan mentioned, you know, that it's a great blessing for us to be called in this particular time period. I mean, it makes me think to myself that, you know, I need to really pick up the pace. I mean, not that I just figured that out just now because he said it, but it goes along with the time period. You know, I don't know if he mentioned concerning what you've seen just recently in the news with ISIS bulldozing some of the Nimrod idols and such, the idols of Nimrod. But I mean, it just made me think about, you know, the fact that Pastor has shown us that, you know, the nations will destroy their own gods. You know, they will plow their own gods asunder. They will destroy their own sacred pillars. And, you know, of course, they're not doing it in order to reverence Yahweh. But, you know, in the book of Yeshua, Yahweh says, I do things 2 and 3 times to save those whom I love from the grave. And, you know, this is to show us that it's definitely going to occur. But those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, they'll understand these things. You know, those who speak the language of Malachim and the language of peace and the language of the last days anointed witness, they'll understand these things. But if we're not studying to show ourselves approved, we're not going to see these things. And, you know, that's what Yahshua Messiah was showing us when he said for us to watch and pray. Okay, it wasn't just watch the news and pray that you're not caught up in it, or watch the news and pray that your flight is not in the winter nor during times of tribulation. You know, it was watch over the words of Yisrayl. Okay, that's, in a nutshell, that's what it was. According to the teachings of the House of Yahweh, okay, when Yahshua Messiah said, watch and pray, he was also saying, watch your foot when you enter into the house of Yahweh. Watch and pray. He was showing us, study to show yourselves approved. Watch these words as they come to pass, as they unfold. You know, the scripture shows us that the unfolding of Yahweh's laws brings light. Yahshua Messiah said, watch and pray. This is what watching is. It's not just enough to watch the news and see what's going on in Russia, okay, with the rebels and all the things that are occurring over there. It's not enough to know that the beastly system is headed for a collapse. It's not enough. You know, it's our duty to stand in the counsel of Yahweh and to do that which is pleasing before him so that we can have a place in the kingdom of Yahweh. So we're going to continue. I want to go to page 188 and we'll start in verse 46. It says, but this set 7 works to prove this set 7 works to prove 7 points. 7 characters, 7 attributes, 7 qualities that can be used. Each one having displayed a certain quality that Yahweh wanted. Now, if you want to find out what those qualities were, go back over the lost faith of the apostles and prophets, where you could see in that book what each era, and also the Mark of the Beast, Volume 2, showing each era, what each era experienced, and what were their failings. Okay, what were the things that they got caught up in? And these things are written for our example so that we can see what we shouldn't get caught up in, what we shouldn't fall into. Look, it wasn't just a great idea and a great story for Yahweh to inspire what King David went through in his lifetime, what King Solomon went through in his lifetime, the struggles that he had, what Samson went through in his lifetime and why he went through it. Those things were profitable for doctrine. Okay, those things were to create in us the 7th character. Okay, which is what it says here. 7 points, to prove 7 points, 7 characters, 7 attributes, 7 qualities that can be used, each one having displayed a certain quality that Yahweh wanted to bring forth in that group. And we have the blessing of seeing all of those qualities. Okay? The third era of the House of Yahweh didn't have the blessing of noticing and recognizing or experiencing the qualities of the 5th era. Okay? And that was the last era. The 5th era was the last era before the 2 witnesses were born in order to finish off Yahweh's plan. Okay, but they didn't have that luxury. The prophets and apostles didn't have the luxury that we have. And I say luxury is not to make it sound light, but they didn't have what we have today. Okay, which is a complete teaching, the complete teaching of Yahweh, what is necessary for us to build that 7th character in each and every one of us. Okay, so but Pastor continues, he said, this is what Yahweh wanted to bring forth in that group, showing that he could. And I'll bring your remembrance to the fact that Pastor has shown us that all of the other works of the house of Yahweh, all of the prophets, when they're resurrected, they will be taught the completion of this righteousness by you. Okay, they will be taught the completion of this righteousness, the 7th character. Okay, salvation was only offered in this era. Okay, now, words like salvation, words like righteous, terms like 613 laws, we've heard them over and over and over and over again, and sometimes they become, so much words, just words. Sabbath day, Shabbat Shalom, Hallelujah Yahweh, Yahweh bless. All of these things, if all of these phrases and terms, if we allow them to, they just become words. And you just throw them out without really even meaning it, without knowing what it means. But if we're studying to show ourselves approved, when you hear Pastor say the 7th character, you'll have all the references in your mind to be able to draw upon in order to rejoice. Because that's one of the things that Pastor wants us to understand and to know. Okay? That Yahweh actually, called us into his house to give us a job that you will totally rejoice in. I was speaking to one of the classes last week, and one of the things that we were pointing out last Sabbath, was there's no 2 individuals in the house of Yahweh that were called out the same way. No 2. It doesn't matter if they're here, if they fell away, if they're sleeping, waiting for resurrection. It doesn't matter. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands. And that's just we're not even talking about all those who were called out around the world, in other countries all around the world, that wound up either they're still in the house of Yahweh or they remain in the house of Yahweh. Every individual was called out differently. There was no two that were called out the same. Each individual's calling was like their fingerprint. No two fingerprints the same. Okay? And the reason why I say that is that we all have to understand that we are unique individuals. And we're being fitly joined together. Because what Pastor showed here was the different eras of the houses of Yahweh fulfilled different portions, different qualities that Yahweh wanted to be in the record so that we can read it and apply it to ourselves. Now, why? Why would we ever apply it to ourselves? What's the purpose? You know, I remember one time one of the priests, he said, he was giving a sermon, and he said, we have to be taught why we should live. In the house of Yahweh, we learn why we should live. In the Catholic Church and Christianity, they're taught to die, because what they say is, when you die, you'll go to heaven, you'll be with God. Right? Because Jesus saved you, so it doesn't matter what type of life that you lived, when you die, you go with God. So now you wonder, is that why there's so many suicides that occur in the world? Is that one of the reasons why? A person hates their life, hate what they see in their life, so they're like, you know what? The Pope told me if I die, I'm going straight to God. Jesus did it all for me. Give me those pills. You see? But this is where that deception has crept in to the very fabric of the people's minds. And this is not, just something that's specific to the U.S. All around the world. When you look at the military, suicide is killing people more than the enemy is. But they have an underlying teaching in their mind that came from the Catholic Church, from the 7 hills of Rome. That when you die, you join God. It doesn't matter. You killed yourself. Maybe you killed someone else. All of these things are forgiven because Jesus did it for you. Okay? And that's just a small point. We could spend the rest of class, going over these things. The pastor's been showing us for decades, as to how this deception that comes forth from the Roman Catholic Church is so subtly destroying our lives to where we don't even recognize it. But these are the qualities. Remember, we learn how to speak the language of peacemakers. We learn how to speak the language of messengers of peace. And to put on that true character of love, the character of love, which is the solid and pure and proper, positive decision making. Okay, because there is an emotion of love. Okay, but the character of love, which we put on, which is the keeping of Yahweh's laws, the executing of proper judgment among brothers. Okay, but let's go ahead and continue. It says, so he showed that he could have done this, but at the same time, since man turned to sin, he wanted to prove to mankind and to heaven, and let them see it. It's like a stage. It's like a movie being set, played in front of us. These 7 qualities in bringing mankind to perfection. Okay, all 7 qualities. Everything that you experience in your entire life was in order to bring you to this point where you are right now. And to be able to utilize all of those points of reference so that you can also be a teacher and guide and direct people to Yahweh. Okay, to remind the people of Yahshua Messiah. To remind the people of Yisrayl Hawkins. Okay, this is what we've experienced. The scripture shows us that that we should praise Yahweh in our possessions, or give glory to Yahweh in our possessions. That means the talents that we have. Whatever ability that you have, whatever talent that you have, use it to uplift and to upbuild the message of the kingdom of Yahweh, and bring forward the calling out of these 7 billion. Yahweh is going to use you to do it. Okay, He's going to use all of us to do this, because He's giving us the ability to do so. Okay, but verse 47, it says, "Now the 7th era is the first." It is the 7th, but it's the first. The first, the last will be first, and the first will be last. This one is the one that we're called on to believe without seeing. And when he says first, he means, like Yahshua said, become a slave. Okay, so when he says first, he means to become like a slave, like Yahshua Messiah said. Okay, you become the top by becoming the least. That servitude, that attitude of servitude. And if we meditate on that teaching that Pastor brought out for us, the attitude of servitude, I could really see exactly why Pastor put here that that's how we're going to be first. Because it takes humility to be a servant. It takes abasing yourself, putting yourself down, putting your own feelings down, your own thoughts, your own aggravations, your own frustrations. It takes putting all of those things down. The subtle retaliation that we often find ourselves getting caught up in, it takes a lot to put those things down. I know these things, okay? But, it takes a lot for us to put these things down. But that's what we have to do. We're in this struggle together. There's none of us that are like, untouchable, that do not experience, these things like as though an alien thing has befallen us. All of us are fighting together and working together and building this 7th character. Okay, this 7th character that Pastor wants in us, in each and every one of us. Okay, so this means, it says, he means, like Yahshua said, become a slave. Become the lowest slave of all, and that's our job. That's it. That's what we're here for. Now, to become the lowest slave, okay, like I'll give you an example. And this is an example that Pastor has given us. In a law office, no one in that office knows more than the secretary. Although she doesn't run the office, she's not the one that, people go to see and all. But nobody knows more than the lowest servant in that office. Because she's got to serve the lawyer. What appointment do I have right now? Well, you're supposed to see this person. Oh, I forgot. Okay. Can you make a phone call and tell them that it's going to take me a yes, I'll do that. And remember, they wanted to talk to you about this, that, and the other thing, and that. You're the best. Thank you very much. You're the best secretary I have. Okay? But these are the ones that know their job. Okay? These are the ones that know their job. Okay? This is the lowest servant. Is actually the greatest servant. And by us being the lowest servants in the universe, we're going to amass the most amount of power because it's going to be necessary. Imagine running around serving the whole universe with no power. You need power to do it. And that only comes through the 7th character, though. And that 7th character is intimately tied to believing without seeing. Okay, so it says, that's what we're here for. We're here to learn to love being a slave. We're here to learn to love being a servant. To learn to know and understand what that means. Okay, to be educated as to what it means to be a servant. I know that's one of the words that we keep hearing, and I've heard it for decades, that word servant. But unless we study and show ourselves approved to Yahweh, a workman who does not need to be ashamed first before he starts studying. Okay? Study to show ourselves approved, a workman to Yahweh who does not need to be ashamed. That's what it says. But when you look at it, oftentimes this is what you'll find. When somebody is brought to shame because they didn't know a specific thing or they didn't know a specific teaching, then they get into the books. Or that shame could be Yahweh Shema hovering right overhead. Man, let me hurry up and cram into the books. Okay? We don't have to be made ashamed first. We have to believe without seeing. When we believe without seeing, that covers the bases. That causes us to study because Yisrayl Hawkins said study. Okay? That causes us to study because Yahshua Messiah said, give your time to reading. Okay? So, continuing, it says, that's the job. You might have thought, let's see. You might have thought you came here to get a man or to find a woman or to start a Christian marriage or something like that. But you actually came here to find your job, to be given a job in the house of Yahweh, and then prove to Yahweh that you can rejoice while you're doing that job. Man, there's no cloak for covering now, guys. There's no cloak for our covering now to rejoice while you're doing the job you're supposed to be doing. Okay? I mean, and once we understand these things, you'll get past the superficial things that we're doing right now, okay? And really, Pastor has already shown us, no, you're not picking weeds out of the field, or throwing a log into the fire to keep the plants warm, okay? To keep the foliage warm, throwing a log into the fire to keep the foliage warm. No, you're not doing that for no reason. And you're not doing that just to be doing that. You're doing that to add a talent, the talent of perseverance, the talent of long-suffering, the talent of servitude, so that you then, praise Yahweh, so that you then can also show somebody else, yeah, I know. Look, when I was there, when I did it too, I forgot I woke up and the fire was completely out, and but look, hurry up and do, this is what you need to do, because at this specific time, then, and if they get too cold, then, you know all of these things intimately because you put your hand to the plow and you didn't look back. Man, Father Yahweh got me out here scrubbing these toilets, and man, is this what the kingdom is all about? Well, yes. Forever, Kahan? Yeah, well, that depends on how much you really love your job. You love your job, it won't be forever. You don't love your job, it just might be forever till you learn to love it. Okay? But verse 49, it says, this is believing without seeing, okay? We do these things believing without seeing. We haven't seen the kingdom come yet. We haven't seen the full glory of Yahweh yet. But we believe that it is through the witness. Okay? And this is the reward that we will receive. We will not be sorry for believing into the one whom Yahweh has sent. Period. Point blank. Full stop. You won't be sorry. Okay? But it continues. It says, there's never been a generation before that was called on to do that, to believe without seeing. There hasn't been. I know we talk about, we haven't suffered persecution unto murder or, unto being killed, or we haven't been sawed in half so that, look, when you look at the prophecy says that the last days is a harder tribulation than all other tribulations. Oh yeah, but I mean we're not being being tortured and waterboarded like the prophets and apostles were waterboarded. Okay, but we're going through these things. Look, they they understood what their duty was. They stood firm until the death. This is not taking anything away from them. But prophecy shows that what we're experiencing right now in these last days is much more intense. And it's even going to get more intense. But you remember where tribulation is, though. Remember that tribulation is here and here. If we strengthen ourselves in the ways of Yahweh, oftentimes, I talk to some of the brothers and we say, there's a saying, it says, a problem is not a problem until it's a problem. And just marinate on that. Let you marinate on that. Okay? But continuing, it says, it wasn't the disciples, but when it was prophesied to be. So we know we're it. Okay? We know that it wasn't the disciples. Okay? It wasn't the disciples. They weren't prophesied to be the seventh era. We are prophesied to be the seventh era, the exact same era that is prophesied that no, they will no longer say, as Moshe took the children of Israel, how many millions of people out of Egypt. But it's going to be said, those who came out of great tribulation. That's you. Okay? But it means, again, that we have to set our mind, as Pastor showed, set our mind in advance on righteousness. Okay? It's going to be a fight. And it is. It has been a fight. We have been. I remember talking to some individuals who used to be in gangs, been in prison, beat up to a hair's breadth of their life, in the prisons and experience things out in the world. He came to the House of Yahweh and said, man, this is tougher than any beat down. And it is. Okay, the House of Yahweh is not for the faint of heart and for the weak. And if we falter, praise Yahweh. If we falter in the day of tribulation, Yahshua Messiah said, then that means our faith was little. But we have to understand what we're experiencing. We have to understand what we're going through and why we're going through it. Okay? And learn to love that servitude. Because that's what's going to unlock these powers that Yahweh wants to give to us. Okay? To be true servants in Yahweh's house and in Yahweh's ways. Okay, but I'm going to just continue here. It says, but Yahshua has called us to believe without seeing, which we did. I never asked for any miracles. I never saw one. I never saw one that I could actually prove was a miracle until this donkey appeared over the homestead. And I'm the one that saw it. And it was plain as day. It says, we need no shading or anything to see that donkey and the cloud in front of it. And these things were shown to Pastor because he believed without seeing. Okay, he believed without seeing. He's being brought and changed and turned into the image and likeness of Yahweh, as was prophesied in Genesis 1:26. Praise Yahweh. That would occur. And remember this, as the priestly blessing goes, may your face, it's Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you. Yahweh be merciful. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. But the specific portion, which was Yahweh's face, may Yahweh's face shine upon you. And Pastor explained it. He said, may your face shine as Yahweh's face shines. And every time we see Yisrayl Hawkins, you're seeing your face shining as Yisrayl Hawkins' face shines, as Yahweh's face shines. And these are the things we have to look forward to. So praise Yahweh.